Awesome. Now we are all here. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming today. So this is the second of our panels for the Career Landscape Workshop, and the title for today's panel is How Can I Prepare Myself for a Teaching-Oriented Career? So this panel is focusing on how do you, if you're a mid-career, for example, graduate student, how do you go ahead and take steps in order to prepare yourself for an application in the future, although everyone is welcome here. The third panel, which is next Thursday, will be how do I apply for teaching-oriented positions? So if you're thinking, in particular, if you're thinking of going on the job market this year, you want to make sure to attend that. And then, of course, we also are going to have office hours later in the summer for folks who are preparing their applications for the job market this year. So welcome, everybody. We are excited that you are here, and I'm excited to have these four panelists with us. So the way that this is structured is we are going to have a little period at the beginning where panelists introduce themselves and I ask a couple questions, but we want you to start inserting your questions that you have for the panelists into the chat or into the Q&A. You can start now if you want, and please, if you're also another attendee, please upvote questions that you want to see answered. And my colleagues will help us manage those questions so that they get introduced into our discussion. After about an hour of this discussion, we'll move to a separate link for our breakout room so you can talk to the individual panelists specifically. And so we hope that you'll also move over into those breakout rooms so you can have those one-on-one conversations with the panelists, because they're pretty awesome people. So I am Kelly Shaw. I am a professor of computer science at Williams College in Western Massachusetts. I am also one of the Computing Research Association Education Committee's program leaders, and I'm working with Janet Davis and Borja Sotomayor on this project. So I'm going to get us started by asking our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. Maybe take a few minutes to talk about, well, your name, your institution and department, maybe a quick explanation of what type of institution you're at, and what your professional role at that institution, including your title and what your job entails. Are you tenure or non-tenure track? How long you've been a faculty member, and just a little for context for some people, what type of institution or department were you at before you became a faculty member? And of course, for one of us, not quite at the faculty member stage, so but we'll find out who in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Jamara. Would you mind kicking us off?
No, I don't mind. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamara Sandvold, and I work at the University of Minnesota in Duluth, Department of Computer Science. So UMD is a public research institution with undergrad and master program. And my role at the institution is a tenure track assistant professor. So that is my title in there. I've been a faculty member at UMD since 2020. And before I did my PhD at Penn State in the informatics department.
And Jamara, does your role involve will focus on teaching, but also scholarship and service as well?
That's right. So I have teaching, I do some research, I advise master's students, and I also conduct mentoring, advise undergrad students, and about 10% of service. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Dietrich, would you mind going next?
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for having me, of course. So I'm just finishing my PhD. I'm the one who has not yet started at my institution. So I'm going to be joining the faculty at Northwestern University in the fall. I'm going to be moving actually in just 2 months here, so I'm very excited. So I am just finishing up my PhD at Cornell. So I did a pretty long PhD, but I'm joining Northwestern as a non-tenure track teaching focused faculty. Northwestern is a R1 institution. It's private, and it has a medium number of students. So it's not a smaller school, but it's not a massive school either. Um, and then my emphasis is going to be on teaching, I imagine. I haven't actually started the job, so we'll see in practice. But what I was told is like 70 to 80% focus on teaching, and then a smaller focus on service, including mentoring, service to the department. And then I'm hoping to do, I haven't yet decided whether I want to focus my last bit on either research or outreach, and I'm still kind of figuring out how to juggle that.
Great. We're excited to have you here, and we're also excited or looking forward to hearing how the transition goes for you as you actually move to the faculty position. Eula, would you mind going next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Eula Schatz. I'm currently an assistant teaching professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, or UIUC. I just started this last fall, so I was on the job market about a year ago, 2 years ago. Anyway, the math. Before this, I was at the University of Michigan, and that's where I did my PhD. Both UIUC and the University of Michigan are big R1 schools that have really big class sizes. So for example, I'm currently teaching an intro CS course that has around 700 students per semester. And yeah, my responsibilities are 70% teaching, 10% service, and then 20% scholarly activity, which could mean a variety of things, and I haven't yet decided what that's going to mean for me. But it is a non-tenure track position. I think that was all the questions.
That was great. Thank you. And Jason, let's go with you.
All right. Hey, I'm Jason Forsyth. I'm an associate professor of engineering at James Madison University. We're a large public, just became an R2 institution, about 22,000 students. But of that population, we're still a majority undergraduate institution. So other departments have master's students and a handful of PhDs. But for where I sit in my college, we're a majority undergraduate institution. Because we're a majority undergraduate institution, my main job is teaching. So as everyone else has kind of said here, I'm in the classroom. I've got about 3 sections a semester. But I also have a scholarship expectation. And I think kind of like Eula said, it's broadly defined. It's what I want, but I'm expected to have a scholarly profile. And for me, that looks like getting small grants, working with undergraduate students in a research lab. I've just finished my 6th year here, but before coming to JMU, I was at York College of Pennsylvania, which is a decidedly teaching track, a decidedly teaching heavy job. And I did my my doctoral work at Virginia Tech, so a large R1 institution.
Great. Well, welcome to you all. And I suppose I should mention that I represent the small private liberal arts college track here. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to ask you the first question, which I'm sure everybody here really wants to know, which is how important is it to have teaching experience when you go on the academic job market? And how did you obtain your teaching experience in order to go on that job market? So I'm going to go in reverse order then. So Jason, if you wouldn't mind starting, that would be great.
I think teaching experience is always a plus. I mean, again, we're hiring people who are going to be most of their time in the classroom. So if you have worked with students, if you have lectured, if you have taught, if you have constructed a course, all of that is great. I think we also recognize that not everyone coming in because of their graduate program will have experience. And so I think that's a question we're going to get to later about how to grab that experience. But it's important. It's a plus. It's not a deal breaker if you don't, at least for us. Like, we'd really be looking at how your teaching lecture went or how you interact with students. But it's nice to have, but it's not a deal breaker if you don't.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, Jason, sort of addressing the how did you obtain your teaching experience now, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. So my advisor clearly told me, if you're teaching, you're not doing research. I like teaching. I love doing it. So I didn't have a formal opportunity to TA or teach a class. I actually gained it in sort of indirect routes in terms of I ran a tutoring program for kids in Blacksburg. So I did that for a couple of years. I did a lot of mentoring. I did a lot of tutoring. And so I think I developed my initial abilities to teach at that level. I'd also been a camp counselor. And so that doesn't prepare me to write a syllabus. That doesn't prepare me to write a homework or an exam. but it does prepare me to interact with younger people, to meet them at their level, to have a good personality and rapport with them. The more formal things about writing a syllabus or lectures or slides, there are lots of workshops that you can go to and things and pick up those skills. So I wouldn't be too worried if you've never taught a class or lectured or done a thing. Like it's going to be okay. There are lots of other indirect routes to get at it.
Thank you. Eula, can you go next, please?
Sure, yeah. So I had a lot of teaching experience both in undergrad and grad school that I used and or like leaned on for my applications and for my interviews. And I don't know how true this is, but I was told that I need primary instructor experience, so like being the lead instructor for a course as a grad student to be competitive in the market. I don't know how true that is. I did end up getting this because that's the advice I got. And at my institution, that was like an option, and they were very nice about helping grad students teach a course in that way who were interested. So that is something I like sought out. But I think it does depend on your institution, and that is going to be taken into consideration, like when you're applying to places. And the way I got a lot of my teaching experience is mostly by fostering like relationships with people. Um, so I talked to lots of professors and lots of people, and at one point I hoped they'd all know that I was really interested in teaching and DEI efforts and things like that. And so when opportunities arose where they needed a grad student or someone to help with these initiatives, they would ask me for help because they knew I was interested. So really kind of letting people know that that is what you want to do helps them think of you when these things pop up. So that's, I think, how I got most of my teaching experience.
Fabulous. Thank you. Dietrich.
Yeah, so I was similar to Eula, I definitely heard that I should leverage my teaching experience really hard, because I did happen to have teaching experience by the time I was because that's what helped me decide I wanted to do a teaching track career. But the advice I was given was, and actually when I interviewed, a lot of people I talked to did not have formal teaching experience. I was told that it is a huge advantage at some schools, and then other schools, it was certainly not a deal breaker and was less of an advantage. So just to kind of bounce, just to further that thought, I think that for me specifically, teaching experience was extremely valuable for my application and also figuring out just what I wanted to do. So to explain that experience a bit more, I was feeling a bit lost because post-COVID life, and I didn't know if I wanted to go into research and what I wanted to do with my life. And my advisor recommended I try and teach a summer class at Cornell, because this is something we're always looking for grad students to do, apparently. So I got pretty lucky to just kind of scoop that up. And then I loved it, and I had the opportunity to co-instruct, which was extremely valuable. Before that, I had done some various mentoring things similarly, which actually I think might have helped aspects of my teaching more than actually being thrown into the fire and teaching a class firsthand. And I bring that up because I want to say that like teaching experience was super valuable for me and for my application, but I think it was not the only piece of where I ended up. And I think that I could have been a successful applicant without teaching experience. That was the path that directed me towards teaching in a sense.
Great. And Jamara?
Yeah, so I agree with what has been said. I also told that teaching is important, but there are different ways for you to practice, or for instance, as has been mentioned, tutoring, mentoring, those are good ways for you to gain practice in teaching, advising. During my PhD specifically, I try to include some teaching components on my research by giving lectures in the public library that was a partner to my project, offering workshops, and those experience helped me to gain some teaching experience as well. So if you are in a place where it's not, it's very difficult for you to have a formal teaching experience as a lead instructor, I would encourage trying these different ways through mentoring, advising, giving lectures or presenting workshops, things like that. I believe it helps you develop those skills that you will need once you are on a teaching position.
Great. So I see a couple of questions in the Q&A, but we're going to continue talking a little bit more for a little while longer about some other topics we want to make sure we cover. But please keep putting your questions in the Q&A, and also, voting on or upvoting ones you also want to see answered. So my next question has to do with, so Eula, you mentioned DEI, your interest in DEI, and I know all of us have this interest, but diversity statements are a fraught topic right now. Some schools may require them and others might not. However, we know that all schools want to ensure their faculty members are inclusive and supportive of all of their students. So how did you educate yourself and develop your skills with respect to being able to effectively interact with all students during, your graduate school? And then how did you demonstrate that when you were interviewing and applying for positions? And so, Jamara, if you don't mind going, we're going to go back we're going to just keep going back and forth. That way I can keep track of who I've asked.
Yeah, thank you. So I did participate in different workshops that would educate myself on those topics, and based on what I learned, I try to apply on the interactions that I would have day to day in both on research experience or teaching experience. For example, my research involved older adults. And so I needed to develop those skills in creating inclusive design and accessible design. And based on that experience, I was able to apply those on my teaching as well, because I became more conscious about, let's say, the font size of my slides or color contrast and things like that, given my experience interacting with older adults. So that's how my experience has been. Just one example.
Thank you. Dietrich?
So I've been thinking about this question a lot, so I'm going to try and keep my answers succinct. I think for me, I'm still very much learning how to best interact with a variety of students. I think when I first was, I think my primary experience with broader interactions is through a very strange mechanism, which is I help students through Discord a bunch, which are all over the world. And it's Discord helping. It's just a random server where people ask questions. There are a bunch of them. I'm addicted to helping people with small questions. If I could just hold office hours the rest of my life, I would. So I do this in Discord. And it's helped shatter some of my preconceptions to have people on the other side of the screen who could be literally anywhere, and I have no idea who they are, what they sound like. I only know what they text. So I've since learned that some of the people I've helped are very different backgrounds than I am. And which for me has helped a little bit, I think, kind of negating some of the biases I had, but obviously I know I have a lot more. So just that's been my personal experience. It's not necessarily super applicable, but I will say interacting with more kinds of students is maybe the thing to take away that's been very valuable, and trying not to limit myself, although that can, of course, be really hard.
Eula?
Yeah, I also was thinking about this a lot. I guess I'll start with the things that I did. The way I learned about this, I think, was through a lot of random workshops and such. I think my life really turned around when, in like my junior year of undergrad, I started reading my emails from my university instead of just deleting them. And I found out there's all these cool events they put on all the time. And some of them teach you about DEI things and diversity and inclusion and how to teach well. And they were just happening and I didn't know. So after reading these, so that's how I knew or found out about a lot of these workshops. And then I also, because I fostered these connections, with some people, they knew I was interested in this kind of work, and an opportunity came up to develop like a new lab section that was like supposed to be really inclusive and create community and things like that. So that I did that for a year and we made a paper out of it. So that was a really cool experience that came about from, like I was mentioning, those relationships I made. But the part that I was thinking a lot about was I feel like the best advice is probably just to lean into what you're excited and passionate about and don't try to like force it. Because like inclusion and diversity can look really different and it can take different forms. And if you're really excited about a certain form of it, then you should lean into that. And then when you make your application one day or you apply for jobs and you talk about that work, you'll have that passion and excitement. And hopefully that'll also line up with the places you're applying, right? So if it's not a good fit, you don't want to work there anyway. So yeah, just trying to lean into what you believe and what you're excited about.
I'm loving all of these answers. Jason.
Just to echo what everyone else has said, Dietrich, I like your word of variety of students. I mean, your classroom is not going to be homogenous. And it's a really stark jump going from grad school where everyone's very similar, very same, and everyone's a self-starter and getting stuff done, and you have a classroom of you said 700 students, right? Like how you've got a spectrum there in terms of abilities and interests and backgrounds and everything. And so I think when you think about DEI and inclusion and diversity, I think if you just say you're going to have a room full of people who are very different than you, who have not had your experiences, how do you teach to them and how do you meet to them? And I think the best way to go about that is to be open and sort of self-reflective on your own practice. Yes, exactly what you're passionate about, do it. Because I think there's authenticity in that and people respond to that authenticity. But also like try to get feedback and interact with the students to say like what's working, what's not, because you may think something's great, but someone with a very different background, a very different perspective may think otherwise. So I think it's also an openness in yourself and in developing that openness. I'm much more open now in my ninth year as a faculty member than I was in my first, right? Because you just had to get it done. I think over time you develop that openness.
Great. So I think we're going to go, because we have a bunch of questions in the class, we're going to go, or in the Q&A, we're going to go with one more prepared question, and then we'll switch over to answering questions from the audience. So teaching focused faculty members are typically well versed in the theory of teaching and pedagogy, and often use terminology and wording drawn from this theory. But most of us didn't learn this as our primary research area for our PhD. Computer architecture doesn't come up much for me, kind of thing. So how did you all get comfortable and learn this terminology so you could, speak to others who are also similarly interested in teaching, and also know best practices and so forth? And so, Jason, you get to go again.
This is a good question. I was lucky that I had an advisor who had an interdisciplinary interest. So we hung out with a lot of engineering educators. He had grants with them. I sat in their reading groups and their research groups. So I was sort of exposed to that research and that pedagogy area early. So the language was sort of familiar to me. I think it's important I think people are going to understand that you aren't going to be an engineering education or computer science education expert. And so you don't need to be top on your terminology or pedagogy, but you should at least be aware. Yeah, you should kind of know what you're saying. And so I think you can find out those groups in your own departments, in your own institutions. There are going to be national conferences. So ASEE, SIGC, like go to these places. They're going to have teaching workshops. They're going to have introductory sort of 101 workshops. I think you just need to be aware and try to find the pattern and theme or pedagogy or approach that matches you. And again, to what Eula said, like try things, find out what you are. And when you find out who you are, kind of lean into it. And I think that's the best way to figure out that teaching side.
Great. Eula, do you have other things to add to what Jason did?
Yeah, so I did my PhD in like classical AI. And my advisor, I mean, he did teach, but he was very like research focused. So honestly, one of the best things I did was tell my advisor at one point blank, I was like, I don't want to do research after this. I want to teach. And at that point, he was like, oh, that's great to know. Here's some like my previous students who are currently teaching, we can connect you with. Like, we'll try to get you graduated as soon as possible because I know like publications don't really matter. So like giving them that context really opened up a lot of doors. And then yeah, just like talking to people, being really open, asking questions. One of my favorite things about teaching is the community. I feel like instructors and teachers tend to be really nice, welcoming people. So if you like have questions on like words they're using or terms or how to talk about something, I think a lot of us are very open to having those conversations.
And lending each other books. Dietrich.
I don't think I have much to add. I just want to echo your sentiment to talk to people, as well as you don't need to know all of the fancy buzzwords and terms. As long as you're shockingly good at communicating is a valuable skill when teaching. As long as you communicate with people, then you can, I think, learn what you need to. But talk to people. I was very scared of not knowing all the current research and stuff because, you know, used to a technical field and all of this. And teaching is very technical. But one of the best ways to become more experienced and learn more about the art of teaching, as well as the science of teaching, is talking to people. So, thumbs up.
And Jamara?
Yeah, I agree. I will just add, as a PhD student, I attended the ACM Tapia conference, and they do had some workshops only focusing for students who are interested in pursuing a teaching career. So I attended to those, and I learned a lot from other professors presenting there. I also attended the CRA for Women as a student. And I wanted to add one more conference. I haven't attended yet, but I heard great things about Respect. That's the name of the conference. And I heard is a good place to learn a lot about, diversity things as we talked before, but also have just networking with people who are in this field and teaching oriented institutions. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are all great programs. I think Respect is next week, if I remember correctly. So with that, thank you very much for answering those questions that we wanted to make sure that we covered. And we'd like to now go to answer some of the questions that are in that the attendees have given us. And so Borja, Janet, can one of you help here with what's a good question that multiple people are interested in finding out the answer to?
Sure. So we've been getting a lot of really great questions, and I encourage folks to keep on submitting these great questions and upvoting the ones that you like. One question that is getting a lot of upvotes is regarding we've talked about how there are opportunities sometimes to teach over the summer if you're in maybe at an institution that doesn't provide you opportunities during the regular school year. But there was a question about opportunities for teaching outside of your own institution. So I was wondering, I'm not sure if our panel has experience with this specifically, but I wonder if anyone has any thoughts on, can you pursue sort of teaching opportunities outside of your institution, like during the summer? Did anyone do that while they were a grad student? And anyone should feel free to to chime in.
Yeah, so one thing I did tutoring, which I recommend because what was it, Cambridge coaching or something? But it pays really well, which is really nice as a grad student, but they look for grad students. And that was honestly really nice because I got CS students from all over the country. So I learned about all their CS programs at different schools and got to see what I liked and didn't like just from these students. And then I also did a couple outreach event things like AI for All, which is a summer program to teach high schoolers about artificial intelligence, and a bunch of various things like that. Yeah, again, I would just make those connections, even if you go to a conference like ASWE or something, and you just talk to people and tell them you're looking for things like this, right? Then they'll keep you in mind for when these things pop up randomly.
Jamara, I think you were maybe also going to answer.
Yeah, just as I mentioned before, I did some presentations in the public library where my institution was located. I went there and I offered, hey, what are your needs? And they have a calendar where you can sign up to present a workshop, a lecture that you seem interested for them, for their public. So that was one thing I did. I also create partnerships with other for outreach. There was an institution that taught technology for older adults. Like I said, that was part of my research, but also had a teaching component. So I offer some lessons for older adults in that way. So just found local institutions outside the university to practice some teaching. That's my experience, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add real quickly. I think one thing to convey to all the attendees here is that, like, for me, like sitting on the other side, like someone who's reviewing applications, like all these informal things are sometimes more valuable. Like you went out of your way to go to the library, you went out of your way to do tutoring. Like I did some summer camps through my institute. Like these are all sort of extra things. Whereas, like, yes, you can have formal teaching experience, but maybe that's like your assigned duty, and maybe you didn't love it, and maybe you weren't great. So please no one discount these smaller informal things, because to Dietrich, what you said, like it's office hours. Like that's exactly what you're practicing. And like honestly, like anyone can make a great PowerPoint and like stand up there and talk or give a lecture, but like, are you good one-on-one with students? Can you interact with them? And that's the sort of thing that's going to come through in the talk and in the job visit. So yes, like please don't discount this informal stuff. I think show your desire to teach and your interest to teach, and that's almost as compelling as actually having done it.
Dietrich, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, so I will mention also, just because some of my colleagues did this when they were graduate students. For example, the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, I think sometimes students will go over to Mount Holyoke and teach classes there, not during the summers, I don't think, but during the academic year. So it may be that there's a small school that's close to you that might be a place where you could potentially teach, and they might have like a pipeline going. So you talk to people, as has been mentioned here. And then I would also, suggest a sort of flavor of this is, their colleges also have like summer programs for advanced high school students, right? So that they're looking for people, for potentially grad students to help with. So that's another opportunity that you could consider. But Borja and Janet, next question. What do you think?
Do you mind if I jump in real
Oh,
quick?
please go ahead, Eula.
There was one question that's already in the answered category, so I wasn't sure if it was gonna come up. This is one thing that I was kind of worried about, like before I went onto the job market, was your teaching evaluations and like how much should I like worry about how good those are gonna be. And I would just say two things. One, I put mine in context on my application, so I know it's for the next panel, but like you can add descriptions, like saying like, oh, this is what happened, or I even put the averages of my department, and also the average of women in my department, because these can be biased a lot of the time, which help put these in context. So you can do that. And then the other thing I was gonna say is I feel like people will really like to see improvement. So if you can say, hey, this is a comment I got in this negative review, and then I did this to like address it, I feel like that would go a really long way, even if the numbers aren't amazing. So that like self-reflection. So it's okay if they're not amazing.
Thank you for that comment. Anyone else who wants to comment on anything before we move to another question? Okay, Borja?
We agreed
Janet?
to alternate
Great. Okay,
questions.
very good. Okay,
So
great.
this is Janet. Again, keep those questions from the audience coming in. One of our audience members has taught a course outside of computer science on social and behavioral science. And so the question is, does formal teaching outside of computer science count? Do any of you have that kind of experience? How did you learn from it? How did you talk about it?
Jason, do you want to go? You seem
So,
very enthusiastic about that.
I'm reflecting that I actually taught like a lecture series in architecture. Like we were doing interactive architecture. So like they gave me 4 weeks of the last bit of the class. So like I think that's cool. That's awesome. Like you can learn how to teach compilers or languages or something else. And again, the fact that you did something that this individual did something outside of their department or their discipline is again demonstrating their interest and the desire to teach, which is just a double plus to me.
Dietrich or Jamar, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, during my PhD, I was an instructor for a class that focused on user experience design. And in my current department, they didn't have anything related to that once I joined. 2020 So then I talked to my department head and said, would the students be interested to learn more about this? It's something I would love to teach. So I first taught the class as a special topic to see how students would react to it, if it would be accepted or not. And now it's moving towards becoming a more formal elective that would be offered more often. So I think depending on the department that you will end up, there's opportunities for you to propose new courses. And even outside the computing area, I think there are opportunities for you to offer those classes later on.
Anyone else? Dietrich?
I just wanted to say I basically agree. I wanted to give my experience. I majored in chemistry in undergrad, so I did some chemistry teaching, which is kind of related. But then also I'm really into art, and I talked about this in my application. And now I'm teaching graphics classes in fall. So yes, the answer is yes. Outside of computing, if anything, I think teaching outside of computing can be more valuable than teaching in computing for us in a lot of ways. You know, especially for someone who has a very computing or technically focused graduate work like I did. Diversified my background a ton.
It definitely shows you can teach to non-majors. Yola, did you want to add anything, or just thumbs up? Either way. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay, Borja, do you have another question for us?
Sure. So one of the I think this is maybe slightly orthogonal to a lot of the discussions that we're having, but I think it's something that people have probably wondered at some point, which is the effect that AI, generative AI, or just AI in general, is going to have. I think we all know that it has an effect on sort of like teaching and a lot of like activities related to teaching and so on. But I think the question goes more to do you think we're just eventually, teaching from people are just going to be replaced by AIs, or or what is your perspective maybe just on how AI is going to affect maybe more teaching track positions?
I have some thoughts about this one. I've talked to a couple of my friends about this who are like in the AI field. And the short answer is I think teaching in person and from a person adds a lot of value that you don't get from an AI. One of the things we were talking about was the respect aspect, or seeing someone that you could end up like. So like seeing someone in a position or at a job or in a field, like to see how you could progress to them, right? You can't do that with an AI because you're never going to be an AI, right? And then it also adds like a level of, I don't know, like respect. Like when you talk to an AI, it can be slightly different or very different than when you talk to a person. And you're gonna act differently and get a different experience and learn all these like soft skills as well that I think you'd really be missing out on if you just were taught by AI. And there are a lot of online, like purely online courses, there's content out there, but I think there's still a need for people to teach. And I think there is value to that.
I did want to talk about a very different perspective here that I hadn't considered before I taught. First of all, I should say I'm very much an AI pessimist. I don't see how teachers could possibly be replaced by AI. Programming is communication. AI are not always great at communicating things or teaching you how to communicate. But so I have some bias there, but I wanted to talk about how students' perceptions of AI are changing how hiring works, because this is a conversation I hold a whole bunch. So while I have no reason to believe that programmers are going to be replaced by AI, a lot of students are seeing the career path as being weakened by the existence of generative AI. They're seeing less hiring that's happening and things like this. Based on the conversations I had with people, this might see a contraction in terms of teaching hiring within the next few years. It's hard to say. Other people have said that this is actually indicative that we need more good teachers because we need to have better mechanisms to kind of deal with the fallout of this, and companies are going to be more interested in highly skilled students than kind of code monkeys. I think it's complicated. I think it's really hard to predict. I'm banking on it, my having a job in 30 years, but also I think one perspective is that, you know, if AI replaces teachers, then there aren't any jobs left, right? So like I think fairly optimistic that there will always be a place for people getting into teaching right now. Now, if you're looking to start teaching in 20 years, I have no idea, but that's my take.
Jason or Jamara, do you have anything you want to add?
I think there are a couple angles to this. I mean, we've all just have lived through COVID, and we realize how terrible it is to learn online all through Zoom. Like, it's refreshing and wonderful and energizing to be back in the classroom. So I don't think that the instructors are going to get replaced by an AI or a screen or a bot anytime soon. And I think if you can get replaced by an AI or a bot, you're doing a bad job, or you've got wrong curriculum or bad projects, or you're just not interesting. Like, and I think that's the irreplaceable part. I do think there's this thing in the job market, but then again, if you thought you were just going to write code and do nothing but write code for 30 years, well, that's not going to work either. So I think we as the instructional faculty are going to be the value proposition that universities sell to students. As populations shrink, as higher education costs rise, what are they selling? Oh, we have great people you're going to come learn from, not a robot that anyone can pay. So I don't see us going away that much.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that has been said. I think, at least on my institution, our conversations has been more in terms of, okay, grading or identify AI generated assignments and homeworks and things like that, homework submissions. So in a teaching position, at least my experience so far has been to deal with that. But going back to the question in the fear of being replaced by AI, I haven't seen much, just in the environment that I am, that fear being present. But the conversations has been more around how, okay, this technology exists, how we address that in our classroom, or include it or not, or prepare our students for their jobs in the future, etc. More in terms of that.
Thank you all. And I'm just going to add one thought in here, which is when I think about AI, I don't think of it as versatile in terms of being able to understand where a student isn't understanding and perhaps come up with another answer or another approach to explain a problem. I think that there's a lot missing there from AI, for AI to be able to do that. And I think that is one of the key functions of our role, is to understand our students and the material well enough that we can understand nuance and help them with different ways of approaching a problem. Of course, I've never used ChatGPT, so I'm a little also not on the AI boat. But Janet, is there another question that we should think about talking about?
Yeah, so this is another question about how you get teaching experience. So for someone who's finished their PhD and maybe gone into industry and doesn't have any teaching experience at this point, but interested in getting into teaching, what would be your advice about how to get started and gain some teaching experience?
So as someone who was kind of thrown in recently into the deep end of teaching, I did want to comment a little bit. I had TA'd once when I was small, when I was like a first year grad student or something like this. And then of course, infinite money, research advisor, teaching is not worth your time, et cetera, et cetera. So when I came back to teaching, I was kind of just thrown into this. I think the biggest thing that I found valuable was having done some amount of mentoring and also having mentored undergraduate students, because I think the thing that I needed to learn the most and was able to demonstrate the most and leverage that to get a real teaching position. And what I ended up talking about in some sense, just as much as my actual teaching experience, was the ability to kind of create organized content and be able to manage students as they progress through a project and be able to be reactive to their needs and things like this. I think this was super valuable both for getting into teaching and then talking about it in my application and stuff like this. One thing I wanted to briefly mention here that I think is really important that we've alluded to, but just to say it out loud, is that teaching is very much not just lecturing. And I just want to really make that point here when it comes down to teaching experience. Talking with instructors and designing materials as a TA or for my own class, I even designed a hypothetical class, which was great for my application process. Having experience actually making that material is as much of a part of teaching is talking in front of students, and in my opinion, actually more important in a lot of ways, less visible, but more essential to a good learning outcome. So kind of a rambling answer, but essentially, from my experience, like doing things in the context of mentoring, developing materials, and structuring student experiences.
Other folks, thoughts?
Can
I want to,
go?
I think sorry, go ahead, Jamara.
Just a quick comment. I think any experience in industry that involves, let's say, mentoring an intern or presentation to a different public, all those things can be applied later or mentioned in your teaching statement as teaching experience. I agree. Teaching experience is not limited to just a formal lecture. There's different ways where you can practice that skill. You can use that for when you're in a job search or changing career path.
Jason?
Yeah, I think if someone's coming from corporate, you know, how did you onboard the new hires? How did you train? How did you work with the summer interns? How did you write policy or procedure that people could understand and follow? Like all these are elements of teaching. Like how do we get people up? How do we make good materials? If you're working in a group, how do you get the group going? How do you set the task for them? Like how do you give them a project? How do you scope the project? All of this is the same stuff in academia that you're going to end up in corporate.
I was also gonna add one thing I did when I didn't know I wanted to teach, or I knew I wanted to teach, but I didn't know if I wanted to teach at a college level or high school level. I actually emailed a bunch of random high schools in my area and asked if I could volunteer in their computer science classrooms, and 2 of them said yes. This was during COVID, so I could do it virtually, which helped a lot with the like commuting issue and like having to go somewhere. But that was really interesting to see what that was like, and that really helped me figure out what I wanted to do, which I think is really important. And that, yeah, it's just volunteering. I think I went for like 1 hour once a week for each of them. So it's very low commitment. So that's a good way of like trying things out. And then I don't know if this is good advice, but I feel like if I were in this person's shoes, I would just try to start small. Like maybe try to get any job teaching anything, like maybe at a community college locally or something like that, and just get some experience like that. And then kind of try to like prove yourself and like build up to like a different place if you want to work somewhere else. Community colleges are also a great place. You could just work there. But or some place that you can like leverage your industry experience as well. I think could go a long way, because some places need people like that for like senior design project, like teaching and things like that. Yeah.
That's a great one. I was going to mention the community colleges, which are amazing places, and you know, students would love to like have folks from industry teaching courses where you know they're familiar with the information, but they can also give the context of you know what it's like to work in the industry that they're teaching in, and so forth. I mean, I would build on also what your experience was. Also think about nonprofit organizations like you know, related to kids learning how to code, right? They need people to help volunteer in their sessions, right? That's a way to get involved. And then also, if you have a colleague who is working who is teaching, right? They might need a guest lecturer every once in a while. And that's a good way to get your foot in the door at that college or university, and then maybe they need an adjunct one time, and then they've already seen you teach, right? So that gives you an opportunity to get that gives you the opportunity for them to think of you, which is also your advice from earlier, Eula. So Borja, do we have maybe one more question, or do we think that we're good on those questions, or anybody else have questions from the audience?
Well, we have one question. Actually, one that just came in that some people might wondering, asking like, is this session being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. I believe the recording, I think I saw Janet post earlier that the recording from last week's workshop should be available on Monday. So this is being recorded. They will be made available, just maybe not like, instantaneously. But the last question we have is regarding how feasible is it to teach a class? So suppose that there is an opportunity to teach as an instructor of record. Suppose it's not the fact that, those opportunities are not there, but, can you really just jump straight into being an instructor of record, or do you, would it be better to like do some TAing first? Can you do the instructor of record without any TA experience? Do folks have any thoughts on that? And I think that's our last question from the Q&A.
Hi, Jason.
I'll take a step there. I would be very wary of going from no experience to full instructor of record. I mean, I just flash back to my first faculty job where I was handed 4 sections. They said, have at it. It's a lot. And the trouble is you're going to want to do well. You're going to want to do it great. And you're going to have the great lectures and the great assignments. And it's going to consume every single ounce of your time, even if it's just one course, because it's going to be your first one and you're going to want to do it well. So I think to the comments we've had before, is there some way you can dip your toe in to find out if you like this or what aspect of this you like before jumping into the whole thing? Because if you're the instructor of record, you're giving the lectures, you're grading, you're crafting the course, you're helping in office hours. So can you try out a piece of that before you try out the whole pie?
Yeah, and I realized I might have accidentally answered part of this in my previous answer, but I was thrown straight into an instructor of record position, and it took up literally all of my time for, it was a 6-week class, full semester long course condensed down into 6 weeks. I think I worked 80 hours a week, and it was not nearly enough, and it's not ideal. I actually really enjoyed it, which was an indication that I should teach. If that amount of suffering, I was still happy, but unnecessary, let's put it this way.
Jamara or Eula, Jamara, looks like you have something.
Yeah, I was gonna say before I had experience as a lead instructor, I was TA for a while, and that prepared me to learn about the behind the scenes things you have to do before you actually go to the class and teach a lecture. And after that experience, then I felt like confident, or I had an idea of things that I would like to apply that fit my personality, or, oh, this topic I would approach in a different angle and things like that. So if you can, I would recommend first being the TA, getting that experience first, and then moving to lead instructor position.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Yeah, I think being a TA first, if possible, is a great way. If that's not possible, a couple other options are one to co-instruct. So at University of Michigan, the classes are really big, so there's multiple instructors anyway. So that's what I did for my primary instruction experience, and that was great because I didn't have to figure everything out on my own, and I had someone to talk to. You could also try to like set up a mentorship relationship. So try to find someone who is like teaching faculty and then like ask if they're willing to like meet with you once a week or something, or like field questions and like take that on for the semester to like help you as you're doing this. Because I think having someone who knows these like ins and outs can really help you also gauge like where to spend your time. But then if you like know this is what you want to do and this is like your only opportunity, I would just say plan ahead and just ask for help and try to look at as many resources as possible. I think it can be doable. You need to like take it seriously and really like put in the work, kind of like what they were saying. Like you're going to be working a lot. but hopefully it can still end up okay or good.
And with that, we're gonna go ahead and finish up this section of the session. So thank you to our panelists for all of their wonderful insights and sharing their experiences. And they're going to continue sharing those experiences and insights with you in the breakout rooms, which we're going to go to in a second. But before that, we really want you to answer this poll that Kaylee has very kindly put up here. Please, please, please answer the poll. The reason we're able to do these sorts of workshops is because funding agencies like National Science Foundation thinks they're important. And so it's good if we can give them feedback about how, or let them know how attendees thought the panels were and how useful the information, and also for planning for future workshops, what went well and so forth. So please take just a minute here. And then we will the breakout rooms are open, and I'm not sure, Kaylee, have those already been sent out, the link, and we'll put them, there it is, the link there and the information for Zoom. So if you go over there, our panelists will very shortly, panelists, you may leave and go over there if you like to go over there now, and we will see everybody over there, and hopefully you'll bring more of your questions there. So thank you all. Thank you so much to our panelists, and we'll see you over in the breakout rooms after you finish the poll.